You know that feeling when someone opens your safe, takes out the diamond you've cut and polished edge by edge, then says, "Just needs a little buffing, that's all." Yeah. Well, this is the story of the day I let them buff it, then smashed them in the face with the copyright. They thought they were playing chess with a pawn. They didn't realize I'd already promoted myself to queen 3 moves ago, while they were still learning which way the horse jumps. My name is Claire Donnelly, and for 6 months, I lived and breathed a single document. Not just any document, a supply chain services contract that would lock in our biggest client for the next decade. $40 million hanging on every semicolon, every indemnification clause, every force majeure provision I carved into that text like Michelangelo working marble. At Northbridge Dynamics, I wasn't just another contract specialist. I was the contract specialist. The one they called when negotiations went sideways, when liability exposure kept the C-suite awake at night, when a single misplaced word could cost us millions. And this contract? This was my Sistine Chapel. Every morning, I'd arrive at our glass tower in downtown Seattle at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before anyone else. The office would be mine alone, just me, the sunrise bleeding through floor-to-ceiling windows, and my contract. I'd spread printed pages across the conference table like a general planning invasion routes. Yellow highlighter for potential vulnerabilities, pink for client pushback points, green for our leverage zones. The payment terms alone took 3 weeks to perfect. Net 45 with a 2% early payment discount might sound standard, but I'd woven in accelerated payment triggers tied to performance metrics that would guarantee our cash flow even if they tried to play games. The limitation of liability section, 27 revisions until it became bulletproof. I'd studied every lawsuit in our industry from the past 15 years, every loophole that had ever been exploited, every ambiguous phrase that had ended up in arbitration. My masterpiece was the termination clause. Most people write termination clauses like exit doors, simple, straightforward, easy to walk through. I built mine like an airlock on a space station. Multiple stages, verification requirements, cure periods that gave us 3 separate opportunities to fix any alleged breach before they could even think about walking away. And if they did walk, the intellectual property provisions would ensure they left empty-handed, unable to use any of our processes, methodologies, or systems they'd grown dependent on. But here's the thing about creating something perfect. You become paranoid about protecting it. Maybe that's why, on a random Thursday evening in February, working alone in the office again, I did something I'd never done before. I registered the entire contract with the U.S. Copyright Office. It started as a joke in my head. This thing is basically my novel, I thought, uploading the PDF to the copyright website. $65 and 15 minutes later. I had an official registration number. Copyright C. Claire Donnelly. All rights reserved. I even added a subtle copyright notice in the footer metadata. Invisible unless you knew where to look. Not in the contract itself. Mind you, that would be unprofessional. Just in the source file properties, time-stamped and authenticated. A signature hidden in the brushstrokes, like the old masters used to do. My colleagues thought I was obsessive. "It's just a contract. Claire," they'd say, finding me at my desk at 9 p.m., cross-referencing indemnification standards against ISO compliance frameworks. But they didn't understand. This wasn't just a contract. This was a fortress built entirely from words, and I was its architect. The client loved it. Their legal team, notorious for shredding first drafts, came back with only minor formatting notes. Their CEO called it the most comprehensive protection document he'd ever seen. My boss, Richard, took credit in the quarterly meeting. Of course, but he made sure my bonus reflected who really built this masterpiece. $30,000 deposited the day we got verbal approval. I backed up everything, every draft, every email, every track change. 3 separate drives, one at work, one at home, one in a safety deposit box at Wells Fargo. People called me paranoid. I preferred prepared. Because here's what 20 years in corporate America teaches you. Every fortress, no matter how well built, is only as strong as the people defending it. And I could already feel the winds changing. New faces in the C-suite, consultants with their efficiency audits, and process optimization presentations. The word disruption getting thrown around like confetti at a wedding. I'd built them a castle. What I didn't know was that they'd already hired someone to burn it down. Madeline Vega walked into our Monday morning meeting like she was strutting down a runway in Milan. Armani suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Platinum blonde hair so perfectly styled it looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. And a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Our new VP of Process Optimization, fresh from the smoldering wreckage of a logistics startup that had burned through $30 million in venture capital before imploding. "I'm here to make Northbridge lean and agile," she announced, her voice carrying that particular Silicon Valley inflection that makes every statement sound like a TED Talk. "We're going to strip away the bureaucracy and get back to basics." Richard, my boss, sat there nodding like a dashboard bobblehead. The man who'd taken credit for my contract was suddenly very interested in his coffee cup. Around the conference table, my colleagues performed the corporate theater we all knew so well. Enthusiastic nodding, thoughtful, careful not to make eye contact with anyone who might interpret it as resistance. Madeline pulled up my contract on the screen. My $40 million masterpiece, now reduced to a PowerPoint slide. "This," she said, laser pointer circling my termination clause like a vulture over roadkill, "is exactly what I'm talking about. 73 pages for a simple service agreement? This isn't a contract. It's a novel." I felt my jaw clench. "It's comprehensive protection for a $40 million. It's bloat," she cut me off. "Our competitors are closing deals with 20-page templates. We're losing agility because we're overthinking everything." She clicked to the next slide, a bar graph showing contract turnaround times. Of course she'd cherry-picked the data, comparing our complex enterprise deals to simple vendor agreements. "Claire, I need you to create a streamlined version, 25 pages max. That's impossible without sacrificing critical protections." "Then sacrifice them." She said it casually, like she was asking me to skip cream in my coffee. "Keep the essentials, cut the paranoia. Our legal team can handle any issues that arise." Our legal team? Two overworked in-house counsels who spent most of their time on employment disputes and trademark filings. They hadn't even read my original contract, just rubber-stamped Richard's approval. "And Claire," Madeline added, already packing up her laptop. "Just copy-paste the payment terms and deliverables into the new template. No need to reinvent the wheel." Copy-paste, 6 months of my life, reduced to Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V. The CEO dialed in from his ski lodge in Aspen. Yes, it was a Tuesday. His face pixelated on the conference room screen. "Madeline's right," he said, wind howling in the background. "We need to be more agile. Claire, have the streamlined version ready by Friday." After the meeting, I caught Madeline by the elevator. "You don't understand the complexity of this client relationship." "I understand perfectly," she said, checking her phone. "You've built job security into that contract. Every clause that requires your expertise to interpret. Every provision that needs your historical knowledge to implement, it's all designed to make you indispensable. It's designed to protect the company." She laughed, the kind of laugh that made you feel 3 inches tall. "The company doesn't need protection, it needs revenue. And your Fort Knox approach is scaring away deals." This particular client specifically requested. They requested a solution, you gave them a dissertation. The elevator arrived, and she stepped in. 25 pages, Claire. Copy, paste, simplify. A monkey could do it. As the doors closed on her smirk, I knew 3 things with absolute certainty. First, she'd already decided to replace me. This was just the opening move. Second, she had no idea what she was about to destroy. And third, that copyright registration sitting in my filing cabinet at home had just become the most valuable document I owned. That night, I started my own documentation. Screenshots of every email, recordings of every video call where legal would allow it, detailed notes of every conversation. If she wanted to play with fire, I'd make sure I had evidence of who lit the match. I created the simplified contract she wanted. 24 pages of corporate suicide, stripping away every protection I'd built. But I did exactly what she asked. I copy-pasted, word for word from my original. My copyrighted original. And at the bottom of page 24, in metadata no one would check, I added a single line. Derivative work created under protest. Original copyright maintains precedence. Madeline wanted simple. I'd give her simple. The simplest trap she'd ever walked into. The butchering took 3 days. I sat at my desk, deleting years of wisdom, one clause at a time. The force majeure section that accounted for everything from pandemics to cyber attacks, reduced to a single paragraph that basically said, stuff happens. The elaborate payment protection mechanisms, stripped down to, pay us within 45 days, pretty please. The intellectual property safeguards that would have prevented our client from reverse engineering our processes, gone, like they never existed. Madeline supervised personally, standing behind my chair like a prison guard. That's redundant, she'd say, pointing at a limitation of liability clause. Delete it. This protects us from consequential damages up to, delete it. Click. $10 million of potential protection vanished. This indemnification language. Too complex, simplify. The escalation procedures for disputes. Nobody reads those, cut them. By Wednesday afternoon, my fortress had become a tent. No, worse, a tarp thrown over some sticks, pretending to be shelter. The kind of contract a first-year law student might draft after a 3-day bender. But I did exactly what she demanded. I copied and pasted, just like she said. Every single word came from my original contract. I just removed 70% of them, like taking the Mona Lisa and cutting away everything except her smile, then calling it streamlined art. I documented everything meticulously. Email confirmations after each deletion. Per your verbal instruction, I have removed section 7.3.2 regarding liability caps. Her responses were perfect evidence. Confirmed. Much cleaner now. Thursday morning, I added my insurance policy. Buried in the signature page formatting, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. I inserted a copyright termination trigger. In legalese so boring that even lawyers wouldn't read it carefully. It essentially said, this derivative works license expires upon termination of Claire Donnelly's employment with Northbridge Dynamics. Nobody would notice. Nobody ever reads the signature pages. Beautiful, Madeline said Friday morning, scrolling through the document on her iPad. See how clean this is? No paranoia, no overthinking, just business. Richard nodded enthusiastically. This is exactly what modern contracts should look like, I wanted to scream. This wasn't modern, it was naked. Like sending a soldier to war in a swimsuit because armor is too heavy. Send it to the client, Madeline ordered. Today. I strongly recommend we have legal review. Legal signed off on your original novel, didn't they? This is just the abridged version. She was already walking out. Send it by noon. I sent it at 11:59 a.m., but not before I did 3 things. First, I backed up the entire email chain to my personal drive. Every instruction, every confirmation, every reckless decision time-stamped and authenticated. Second, I sent a CYA memo to HR, copying legal. Please note that the attached streamlined contract has been sent to our largest client under direct orders from VP Madeline Vega. Despite my professional reservations about the removal of critical protective clauses, I want to ensure this is properly documented. Third, I updated my copyright registration with the Copyright Office, adding the derivative work as an addendum, clearly establishing the chain of ownership. The client's response came Tuesday morning. It started politely enough. We're concerned about several missing provisions from the previous draft. By Wednesday, it had escalated. The absence of standard protections makes this agreement unacceptable to our board. Thursday brought the death blow. We're suspending negotiations pending a complete review of Northbridge's contract management processes. Madeline called an emergency meeting. The conference room felt like a funeral parlor, everyone staring at their laptops, afraid to breathe too loud. There's been a misunderstanding with the client, she began, her voice still maintaining that TED Talk confidence. They seem to think we've reduced our service guarantees. I stayed silent. I'd learned long ago that when someone's digging their own grave, you don't offer them a ladder. Claire, she turned to me. You worked on this contract. Can you explain why the client is concerned? I pulled up my original email. As documented here, I recommended maintaining the protective clauses. You instructed me to delete them for simplicity. I instructed you to streamline, not gut the protections. I pulled up her email. Quote, delete it. Sent Tuesday, 2:47 p.m., regarding the limitation of liability clause. Her smile finally cracked. Just a little, like a hairline fracture in porcelain. Richard cleared his throat. Let's focus on solutions. Can we send them the original contract? The original was rejected for being too complex, I reminded him. That's why we created this version. The CEO's face appeared on screen from his yacht, because of course he was on his yacht. Fix this, now. But it was already too late. Friday morning, the client formally terminated negotiations. $40 million, gone. Because someone thought my fortress was too paranoid. The real fun, though, was about to begin. The explosion was swift and merciless. Friday afternoon, the email went company-wide. Our biggest client, the one whose logo we plastered on every investor presentation, whose case study anchored our website, whose revenue kept our stock price from tanking, gone, not postponed, not under review, gone. I watched from my desk as the news rippled through the office like a shockwave. First, the sudden silence as people read their emails, then the whispered conversations, then the barely contained panic as department heads scrambled into emergency meetings. The stock price dropped 12% in after-hours trading. Monday morning came like a hangover after a 3-day bender. The office felt hollow, like someone had sucked the air out of it. People moved through the halls in slow motion, their faces carrying that particular blend of shock and dread you only see during layoffs or acquisitions. Madeline, of course, had spent the weekend crafting her narrative. By the time she called the all-hands meeting Tuesday afternoon, she'd transformed herself from executioner to investigator. We need to discuss the failure in our contract management process, she began, standing at the podium like a prosecutor addressing a jury. Behind her, a PowerPoint slide showed a timeline of the contract negotiations. My name appeared in red at every critical juncture. The client has cited numerous concerns, she continued, clicking through slides that carefully edited the story. Primarily, they felt the contract terms were changed without proper communication. Changed, not gutted, not destroyed, changed. Our investigation shows that the contract specialist responsible, she didn't say my name, didn't need to. Everyone was already looking at me. Failed to properly flag the risks of these modifications. I had 53 emails proving otherwise, but I kept my mouth shut. When someone's setting you up as the fall guy, you don't show your cards early. Richard, my spineless boss, finally found his voice. We should note that the modifications were made under specific instructions. Instructions to streamline. Madeline cut him off. Not to eliminate essential protections without documentation. Documentation. I almost laughed. I had so much documentation I could wallpaper her office with it. The CEO appeared on screen, broadcasting from his penthouse. His message was brief. We need accountability. We need to show the market we're taking this seriously. That's when I knew. This wasn't a meeting about what went wrong. It was a public execution. HR took over from there. Jennifer from Human Resources, who'd never made eye contact with me in 5 years, suddenly found her confidence. After reviewing the situation, we've determined that there was a critical failure in risk communication and contract management oversight. They'd even prepared a termination package. 2 weeks severance, insulting for someone with my tenure. and a mutual non-disparagement agreement that would essentially gag me from telling the truth. This is effective immediately, Jennifer announced, sliding the folder across the conference table. We'll need your badge and company laptop. 200 colleagues watched in silence. Some looked sympathetic, most looked relieved it wasn't them. A few were already eyeing my office, calculating their chances of claiming it. I stood slowly, gathered my personal items from my desk under security supervision, how's that for 15 years of service, and walked out with my head high. But before I left, I made sure to forward one final email to my personal account, the one with the copyright registration number. That night, while Northbridge's PR team crafted press releases about personnel adjustments and renewed commitment to client satisfaction, I sat in my home office, organizing my ammunition. Every email printed and sorted chronologically. Every contract version saved with metadata intact. The copyright registration certificate, framed now, sitting on my desk like a trophy I hadn't won yet. The client termination was worth $40 million in lost revenue. The stock drop wiped out $300 million in market cap. And they'd just fired the only person who understood the contract well enough to know exactly how much trouble they were in. Because here's what Madeline didn't understand when she ordered me to copy-paste my work. When you copy someone's copyrighted material without permission and use it for commercial purposes, that's not streamlining, that's theft. And she'd done it in writing with 200 witnesses after firing the copyright holder. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff, the bottle I'd been saving for my next promotion, and opened my laptop. Time to introduce Northbridge Dynamics to my new best friend, intellectual property law. The game wasn't over, it had just begun. And this time, I wasn't playing defense. The all-hands meeting was theater, but the performance wasn't over. They'd scheduled it for 3 p.m. on Tuesday, maximum visibility, ensuring everyone would witness my professional execution. The main conference room was packed. Overflow crowd watching from their desks on video stream. Madeline had orchestrated it perfectly. The lighting, the seating arrangement, even the way she'd positioned herself at the head of the table like a queen holding court. We need to address the elephant in the room, she began, her voice carrying that false gravity executives adopt when they're about to destroy someone. The loss of our largest client represents a fundamental breakdown in our contract management process. She clicked her remote. My photo appeared on screen, my corporate headshot from 3 years ago, smiling and naive. Next to it, a red arrow pointing to a loss figure, $40,000. Despite multiple opportunities to flag concerns, our contract specialists failed to adequately communicate the risk involved in the revised agreement. Multiple opportunities, I'd sent 53 emails, I'd called 4 emergency meetings. I'd literally stood in her office and begged her to reconsider. But history, as they say, is written by the victors. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For a moment, I thought he might actually grow a spine. To be fair, the modifications were made, yes. Madeline interrupted smoothly. But risk assessment and communication, that's the contract specialist's primary responsibility. She clicked again. A slide titled Communication Failures appeared, listing every point where I supposedly should have escalated concerns. The dates were real. The contexts were fiction. Furthermore, she continued, we've discovered that the simplified contract contained numerous errors and omissions that weren't caught during the review process. Errors and omissions. She meant the protections she'd ordered me to delete. Jennifer from HR stood up, holding a manila folder like it contained nuclear codes. Given the severity of the situation and the financial impact to the company, we've made the difficult decision to terminate Claire Donnelly's employment, effective immediately. The room went silent. 200 people, collectively holding their breath. This is not a decision we've taken lightly, Jennifer continued, reading from a script she'd probably rehearsed in the mirror. But accountability is essential to maintaining client trust and market confidence. She slid the folder across the table to me. Your severance package, 2 weeks' pay, continuation of health benefits through month end, and a standard non-disparagement agreement. I opened the folder slowly, making sure everyone could see me reading it. The non-disparagement clause was a masterpiece of legal overreach. Basically, if I so much as frowned in Northbridge's direction, I'd forfeit everything. Any questions? Jennifer asked, though her tone suggested questions were strongly discouraged. I had one. For clarity, you're terminating me for failing to prevent the implementation of changes that I was explicitly ordered to make. Madeline's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. You're being terminated for failure to adequately perform your risk management duties. Despite the 53 emails I sent warning about these exact risks, we've reviewed your communications. They lacked the urgency required for a situation of this magnitude. Lacked urgency, I'd use the words catastrophic, severe liability, and potential contract termination in bright red. 14-point font. The CEO's face appeared on the conference screen, broadcasting from what looked like a golf course. Claire, we appreciate your years of service, but we need to move forward. Please sign the document so we can all begin the healing process. The healing process. Like I was a tumor they needed to excise. I stood up slowly, feeling 200 pairs of eyes on me. Security was already hovering by the door. 2 guards I'd shared coffee with every morning for 5 years, now avoiding eye contact like I might be contagious. I'll need time to review these documents with my attorney, I said calmly. The offer expires at 5 p.m. today, Jennifer added quickly. Standard procedure. Standard procedure, nothing about this was standard. They escorted me to my desk, 15 years reduced to a banker's box and a security escort. I packed slowly, methodically, making sure everyone could see my awards, my certifications, the photo from the company picnic where the CEO had called me invaluable. But the most important thing had already been secured, forwarded to my personal email that morning, backed up in 3 locations: the copyright registration, the email chains, the metadata, everything. As security walked me through the lobby, past the reception desk where my photo had hung on the Employee of the Quarter wall just 6 months ago, I kept my head high, let them watch, let them whisper, let them think they'd won. Because Madeline had made one crucial error in her perfect execution, she'd admitted in front of 200 witnesses that the contract I'd created, my copyrighted contract, had been used without my permission after my termination. The unemployment line? That wasn't my next stop. My next stop was the law office of Ethan Cade, intellectual property attorney extraordinaire, who'd been waiting for my call since I'd first registered that copyright. The queen had been knocked off the board. But in chess, a pawn that reaches the other side can become anything. And I was about to become their worst nightmare. Ethan Cade's office occupied the 32nd floor of the Rainier Tower, all glass and chrome with a view that made you understand why his hourly rate could buy a decent used car. He didn't look like a typical lawyer, more like a bassist from a punk band who'd accidentally gone to law school. Sleeve tattoos peeked out from his rolled-up shirt, and his Harvard law diploma hung slightly crooked, like he'd done it on purpose. So, he said, reviewing my documentation for the 3rd time. They explicitly instructed you to copy-paste your copyrighted work into a new document, then fired you, and are still using that document. They're trying to salvage the client relationship. Madeline's been sending revised versions all week, all based on my original structure and language. He actually laughed. This is beautiful, I mean, legally speaking. Personally, I'm sure it's horrible, but legally, chef's kiss. He pulled up the Copyright Act on his monitor. Section 106 gives you exclusive rights to reproduce, distribute, and create derivative works. They've violated all 3. Section 504 allows for statutory damages up to $150,000 for willful infringement. It was willful. I have emails where Madeline specifically instructed me to copy-paste. Even better. And this termination trigger clause you embedded? He whistled low. Brilliant. The moment they fired you, their license expired. Every use since then is a separate act of infringement. We spent 3 hours crafting the cease and desist letter. Ethan was an artist, every word chosen for maximum impact. We listed every instance of infringement, attached the copyright registration, included screenshots of Madeline's copy-paste instructions, and cited 17 different federal cases establishing precedent. The demand was simple: stop using my copyrighted material immediately. Destroy all copies and pay $325,000 in damages, a number Ethan calculated based on their continued use, the commercial benefit they derived, and what he called the stupidity tax. We could ask for more, he said, but this number is perfectly calibrated, high enough to hurt, low enough that litigation would cost them more. He sent it via certified mail and email to the entire board of directors, the legal department, and Madeline personally. Subject line: urgent copyright infringement notice and demand for immediate cessation. The first call came within 2 hours. Jennifer from HR, her voice an octave higher than usual. Claire, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Please direct all communications to my attorney, I said, and hung up. The second call came from Richard. Claire, we've always had a good relationship. Surely we can work this out? Attorney Ethan Cade, Google him. The third call was from their general counsel, who went straight to Ethan. I sat in his office listening on speaker as she tried damage control. This is clearly a retaliatory claim following her termination. My client registered the copyright months before her termination. Ethan responded smoothly. Would you like me to read you Madeline Vega's email instructing her to copy-paste? That was a directive to use company property. The copyright is registered to Claire Donnelly personally, not Northbridge Dynamics. I have the certificate right here. Would you like the registration number? A long pause. What does your client want? Did you not read the demand letter? $325,000, an immediate cessation of use. That's extortion. That's copyright law, and frankly, it's a bargain. Would you prefer we go to federal court and add legal fees? Another pause. We'll need time to review. You have 72 hours. After that, we file for an injunction. Imagine explaining to your shareholders why you can't use any contracts while this is litigated. He hung up and turned to me with a grin. They'll cave. They have to. They can't function without contracts, and they can't risk a federal injunction. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Ethan, I said, pulling out my phone. How do you feel about adding another dimension to this? What if I told you I have a buyer for an exclusive license to my original contract, specifically for use with the client Northbridge just lost? His grin widened. I'd say you're playing three-dimensional chess while they're still learning checkers. Who's the buyer? Harborline Global, Northbridge's biggest competitor. They've been trying to poach this client for 3 years. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. You magnificent bastard. You're going to license your contract to their competitor to win the client they lost because of the butchered contract? Is it legal? Completely. You own the copyright. You can license it to anyone you want, for any purpose you want. As long as Northbridge isn't using it after our cease and desist, you're free and clear. I made the call to Harborline that afternoon. Their CEO nearly choked on his coffee when I explained the situation. By evening, we had a deal. $250,000 for an exclusive license to use my original contract framework with one specific client, the $40 million whale Northbridge had just lost. The chess pieces were all in position. The game was nearly over. Northbridge just didn't know they'd already lost. The call from Harborline's CEO, Marcus Webb, came at 9 a.m. sharp Wednesday morning. I'd met him twice at industry conferences. The kind of executive who remembered everyone's name and actually listened when you talked. Claire, he said, I've just finished reviewing your contract framework with our legal team. It's exceptional. Exactly the kind of comprehensive protection we need. Thank you. I assume you've heard about Northbridge's situation. He chuckled. Heard about it. Their client called us yesterday. They're shopping for a new vendor, and they specifically mentioned wanting the same level of contractual sophistication they'd initially been promised. The same level I'd built. The level Madeline had destroyed. Here's my proposal. Marcus continued. We'll pay you $250,000 for an exclusive license to use your contract framework for this specific client engagement. Our legal team will customize the company's specific details, but the structure, the protections, the risk mitigation strategies, that's all yours. Exclusive meaning Northbridge couldn't license it for this client. Exactly. Though from what I hear, they have bigger problems right now. He was right. Ethan had forwarded me Northbridge's panicked response to our cease and desist. They were demanding proof of copyright, claiming work for hire, throwing every legal theory at the wall to see what stuck. I'll need the agreement in writing, I said, and the payment upfront. Our legal will have it to your attorney by noon. Wire transfer upon signature. I hung up and immediately called Ethan. Harbor lines in, $250,000. Outstanding, and perfect timing. Northbridge's general counsel just sent a novel-length response claiming your copyright is invalid. Is it? Not even close. They're citing work-for-hire doctrine, but you registered the copyright personally, not as a company asset. They'd need to prove you created it within your scope of employment specifically for them to own it. I created it outside of work hours. Even better, did you use company resources? My own laptop, my own time. I even have timesheet records showing I wasn't billing those hours. Ethan laughed. You really did plan for everything, didn't you? By Thursday afternoon, the Harbor Line deal was signed. The wire transfer hit my account an hour later. $250,000 for something Madeline had called paranoid overthinking. But the real satisfaction came Friday morning. Marcus called again. We just sent our proposal to the client using your contract framework. They want to meet Monday, their legal team said, and I quote, "This is exactly the level of sophistication we expected from our previous vendor." Meanwhile, Northbridge was imploding. Ethan forwarded me their latest legal response, 20 pages of increasingly desperate arguments. They'd even hired outside counsel, which meant they were burning through legal fees at $800 an hour. They're stalling, Ethan explained. They can't use your contract anymore, but they also can't admit to their board that they lost the copyright to their biggest contract framework. They're trapped. What about the $325,000? Oh, they'll pay. They have to. But first they'll exhaust every other option, bill another $100,000 in legal fees, and then quietly settle to make this go away. He was playing the long game, but I had one more move. I called Marcus again. How would you like some additional intelligence on the client's concerns? I'm listening. I have detailed notes from 6 months of negotiations. Every concern they raised, every provision they specifically requested, every internal stakeholder's priority. Nothing confidential to Northbridge, just my personal observations about the client's needs. What's your price? No price. Consider it included in the license. I want you to win this. Why? Because Northbridge needs to understand that when you destroy the architect, you lose the blueprints. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Send me what you have. If we win this, when we win this, there's a consulting position here with your name on it. I sent him my notes that afternoon. 6 months of psychological profiles, negotiation strategies, stakeholder maps. Everything you learn about a client when you're building their fortress, one brick at a time. Northbridge's board met in emergency session that night. I knew because Jennifer from HR texted me. We'd been friends before she'd read me my termination letter. They're panicking, she wrote. Madeline's been in there for 3 hours. Good. Let her explain how her streamlining had cost them $40 million in revenue, $300 million in market cap, and now a potential copyright lawsuit that could freeze all their contract operations. Saturday morning, Ethan received a new communication from Northbridge's outside counsel. They wanted to discuss resolution. They're ready to fold, he told me. But let's make them sweat through the weekend. Monday morning, we'll accept their surrender. The game was almost over. Harborline was about to win a $40 million client using my blueprint. Northbridge was about to pay me more than 6 years of salary for the privilege of their own stupidity. And Madeline, she was about to learn that when you tell someone to copy-paste their own work, you better make sure you own it first. Monday morning arrived like Christmas, and a court date rolled into one. At 9 a.m., Harborline met with the client. Marcus texted me updates in real time. They love it. Every provision they wanted is here. Then, they're asking who wrote this. And finally, they want to sign today. At 10 a.m., Northbridge's outside counsel called Ethan. I sat in his office, watching him work his magic on speakerphone. Our client is prepared to offer $200,000 for a complete release, their lawyer said. $325,000, Ethan responded. Plus, destruction of all copies and derivatives. That's unreasonable. Federal statutory damages for willful infringement go up to $150,000 per work. Would you prefer we explore that avenue? I'm sure the court would find Madeline Vega's copy-paste email fascinating. A long silence. We'll need a non-disclosure agreement. Mutual non-disparagement only. My client reserves the right to accurate statements about her work history. Fine. $325,000, but we need this resolved today. Wire transfer by 3 p.m., or we file for the injunction. At 2:47 p.m., the wire hit $325,000. Combined with Harborline's payment, I'd made $575,000 from the contract Madeline had called bloated paranoia. But the crescendo came at 4 p.m. Marcus called, and I could hear champagne in the background. We got it, $40 million, 5-year term, they signed an hour ago. Congratulations. No, Claire, thank you. And that consulting position? It's yours whenever you want it. Senior Director of Contract Strategy. $275,000 base, plus bonuses. I told him I'd think about it. But first, I had one last thing to do. I opened my laptop and typed a LinkedIn post. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that violated the non-disparagement agreement. Just, excited to announce I'm consulting on contract strategy for Fortune 500 companies. Remember, your intellectual property is your most valuable asset. Protect it accordingly. Within an hour, it had 300 likes, including one from a Northbridge board member. Jennifer texted me that night. Madeline's been placed on administrative leave pending restructuring. Thought you should know. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I stood on my apartment balcony, Seattle spread out below me like a circuit board. In my hand, a glass of champagne, the bottle I'd been saving since my last promotion at Northbridge. It tasted better than I'd imagined. My phone buzzed. Another text from Marcus. Client wants to meet you. They specifically asked for the genius who built the bulletproof contract. Dinner Thursday, I typed back. I'll check my consulting rates. 6 months ago, I'd built them a fortress out of words and paranoia. They'd torn it down because someone who'd never been in a real negotiation thought she knew better. But here's the thing about intellectual property. It doesn't care about office politics or corporate hierarchies. It belongs to whoever creates it, whoever has the foresight to protect it. Madeline was right about one thing. The contract was my masterpiece. She just didn't realize that masterpieces come with signatures. And mine, copyright, C. Claire Donnelly, was worth more than she'd ever understand. I raised my glass to the Seattle skyline, to every contract specialist who'd been told they were overthinking, to every professional who'd been sacrificed for someone else's mistakes. The game was over. The Queen had won. And somewhere across the city, in a glass tower that had just lost its biggest client, they were finally learning the difference between streamlining and suicide. I didn't smile because I'd won. I smiled because I'd played exactly the game they'd forced me to play, and I'd played it better. Check. And mate, thank you for listening to my story of corporate revenge and sweet vindication. I'm curious, where are you listening to this tale of contracts and comeuppance? Drop a comment below and let me know what corner of the world you're in. If you enjoyed watching Claire turn the tables on Northbridge, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories of workplace justice. And share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed someone's paranoid preparations become their greatest weapon? Let's discuss in the comments below.